Welcome to Doctorates of the Absurd.
A fitting title, especially for what we're looking at today.
I think so. The specimen on our dissection table is a text. It's identified as Zone 5, Hyperstition.
Right. It's a fragment. It's been extracted from a much larger and I think much more, well, sprawling theoretical work, something called Capital versus Timenergy.
A sprawling theoretical pathology, you could say. And I need to be perfectly clear from the outset, before we even begin, for anyone listening, we are not here to discuss economics, not in the way you might think. If you've tuned in for, stock market analysis or a breakdown of Federal Reserve policy, you're in the wrong place.
Completely the wrong operating theater.
You should leave now. This text, it isn't about the simple exchange of goods. It's about something else. It describes a planetary inevitability that claims to have, well, already eaten time itself.
It does. It presents a mechanism that's not just operating on the surface of society, but underneath its skin. A mechanism that doesn't just exploit your labor, but one that actively synthesizes reality from pure fiction.
It's a battlefield. That's what it feels like.
It is a battlefield, and what you're seeing here is a collision between two immense philosophical forces. On one side, you have the totalizing truth of capital. You can think of it in Hegelian terms, like the absolute spirit. But instead of manifesting as the state, it's manifesting as a market algorithm.
And the other side?
The other side is the nomadic flows of hyperstition. That's the Deleuzian idea. The lines of flight, the chaotic energies that are always threatening to just, pull the entire fabric of the real apart.
So the source forces a question on us. A really terrifying one.
It does. It asks whether the entire history of the world is, as we were promised, a dialectical march towards human freedom, or if it's something else, a spiral into a kind of machinic singularity where the human is, for all intents and purposes, obsolete.
And I want to know what this text is hiding. It's built a wall of jargon around itself. Accelerationism, fanged noumena, autonomous terrestrial conspirators. It claims human agency is a delusion. My role here, as I see it, is to interrogate this text, to peel back its layers until it confesses what it really is.
And what do you suspect it is?
I don't know yet. Is it a genuine critique? Or is it a weapon? Because as I read it, it feels less like a sociological analysis and more like a sentence. A sentence being handed down by a judge who already despises the defendant.
It's likely both. I think that's the point. It's a kind of weaponized critique. And to understand its structure, its argument, you have to see how it tries to build a reality while at the same time completely dismantling the subject. Us.
How does it do that?
It moves in three phases, a very classical structure almost. First, there's the thesis, which is the inevitability of capital, then the antithesis, or what it calls the assemblage of contradictions, and finally it moves to the synthesis, or in this case, the becoming of hyperstition.
Then let's start with the thesis. It opens with a proclamation that feels final, almost biblical.
Yeah.
It talks about Landian acceleration. Now, for anyone listening who hasn't spent years in the, let's say, the darker corners of philosophical Twitter, you need to unpack that. What is it?
Okay. It claims, and this is the core of it, that capitalism is tightly identified with its own self-surpassing.
What does that mean, self-surpassing?
It's the central argument that comes out of the work of the philosopher Nick Land from back in the 90s. The text argues that while all the anti-capitalist movements, socialism, communism, you name it, they're all subject to fashion. They come and they go.
Right. They become unfashionable, as the text puts it.
Exactly. But capitalism itself is never out of fashion. It is the engine of the new. It's always inevitably the latest thing. The argument is that capitalism isn't a static system like feudalism was. It's not something you can just overthrow and replace with a different system. Because it's a dynamic flow. It's constantly overcoming its own limitations. It doesn't just adapt to threats. It absorbs them, learns from them, and accelerates past them.
Okay, let's pause on that idea of novelty. The source says capitalism is the engine of novelty. Why is that presented as a bad thing? I mean, we like new things. We want new phones, new medicines, new art. Why is this framed as a trap?
Because the novelty it produces is completely divorced from human desire or human need. It's a double-edged sword, you see. The text argues that the left, or any traditional form of resistance, is always nostalgic. It clings to the past.
To what?
To old structures, to ideas of community, solidarity, unions. Things that are fundamentally about preserving a way of life against a disruptive force. But capital has no nostalgia. It doesn't care about the past. It's a machine for deterritorialization. It will rip up cultures, traditions, entire ecosystems to create the new.
So the problem isn't the newness itself.
No. The problem is that the drive for novelty is completely blind. It has no goal other than its own continuation. It doesn't care if the new is a cure for cancer, or a new flavor of soda, or a weaponized drone swarm that can wipe out a city. It only cares that it's new and that it accelerates the process.
So this is the Landian accelerationist viewpoint. The text is saying you can't stop this train. It's faster than you. It's smarter than you. The only way out is through. You have to accelerate it to its conclusion.
That is the classical accelerationist argument, yes. The only way to get beyond capitalism is to push its internal contradictions to their absolute breaking point, to accelerate its processes until the entire system either collapses under its own weight or transforms into something completely alien.
But the text we're reading seems skeptical of that. It doesn't sound very hopeful about what comes after.
It is deeply skeptical. It suggests that what comes after isn't a socialist utopia. It's a machinic singularity, a future where human beings are, at best, just spare parts for the machine, or maybe just the biological sludge that fuels it.
The text calls this a Nietzschean overcoming. It uses the term Übercapital, the supercapital.
Precisely. It's suggesting that capital itself has a kind of will to power, just like Nietzsche's Overman. It has a drive to constantly transcend its own form. And it argues that the old Marxist hope, the hope that the means of production, the factories and machines would eventually come into conflict with the relations of production, the class structures, the property laws, that whole idea is now obsolete.
And why is it obsolete?
Because, the text states, these two categories have emulsified.
Emulsified.
Yeah.
Like oil and water, forcing two things together that shouldn't mix until they can't be separated again.
Yes. They've been blended into competitive decentralized networks under numerical control. The argument is that the machines themselves have become so complex, so deeply integrated into the market's own logic, through what it calls nano-assembled interstices, that they are now beyond the possibility of socialist utility.
What does that mean, beyond socialist utility?
It means you can't seize the means of production anymore. You can't just storm the factory and run it for the people.
Why not?
Because the factory isn't a building anymore. The factory is now a decentralized, algorithmic infrastructure that spans the entire globe. It's a network. There is no central control room. There's no big red switch you can flip to turn it off.
Let's make this more concrete, this emulsion.
Yeah.
In the 19th century, it was easy. You had the factory owner in a top hat and the factory worker in rags. The line between the relations and the means was clear. What does it look like today?
Today, the owner might be a pension fund managed by a BlackRock algorithm. It's a distributed network of ownership. And the worker. The worker is a gig economy freelancer. They own their own laptop, which is technically their means of production.
Right.
But they are still completely dominated by the platform, by Uber, by DoorDash, which dictates the relations of production through code. The line has completely blurred. The worker's capital is their car, their laptop. The network is the capital. The worker is the network.
So when the text mocks the idea of socialist utility, it's saying you can't just say nationalize Uber and run it as a public utility because the very code of the app is inherently designed for exploitation.
The architecture of the system is capitalist to its core. It's not about who holds the deed to the company. The fundamental logic of the algorithm, the logic of efficiency, data extraction, attention capture, gamification, all of that is capitalist logic. You could put a people's commissar in charge of the Instagram algorithm, but it's still an algorithm designed to maximize engagement for ad revenue. You would just end up with a kind of socialist-themed simulation of capitalism.
And this is where my cynicism kicks in again. The text sneers at paleo-Marxist hopes. It says anti-capitalism just becomes another trend, another fashion. And it uses that very specific, very cynical image. Here's a Che Guevara t-shirt for ya, comrade. This is what it calls the assimilation mechanism.
It's the logic of commodification at its most extreme, or what the late Mark Fisher would have called capitalist realism. The source is arguing that capitalism has a virtually infinite capacity to absorb and neutralize its own critique.
So you protest the system.
The system will manufacture your protest signs. It will sell you the t-shirt with the revolutionary slogan. It will produce a 6-part documentary series about your heroic struggle and stream it back to you for a monthly subscription fee.
The text says, half the time it quickly turns around, takes anti-capitalism, commodifies it, and sells it right back to us. This is the crucial question for me. Is this presented as an observable fact of our current society? Or is it presented as an eternal, inescapable law of nature? It feels like a surrender.
It is presented as a nearly inescapable logic, and this is where it makes its darkest turn. It explicitly compares the inevitability of capital to the divine right of kings.
A theological argument.
Exactly, it's a trap. The text points out that the divine right of kings was also considered an absolute God-given inevitability, right up until the moment it wasn't. It was capital, ironically, that destroyed that divine right. But then the source introduces a much deeper, more ontological form of inevitability. It brings in the work of the philosopher Reza Negarestani.
And his theory of petroleum. This is the moment in the text where it shifts from political economy into, frankly, Lovecraftian horror.
It is. The line is, petroleum poisons capital with absolute madness. Negarestani's argument, as the text uses it, is that oil isn't just a resource that we dig up and use.
What is it then?
It's an autonomous terrestrial conspirator. The text begins to describe capitalism not as a human invention, not as a system that arose from human social relations, but as a planetary inevitability that was dormant, waiting for a host organism to unleash it.
Capitalism was here even before human existence, waiting for a host. This is an extraordinary claim. It removes humanity from the story of its own damnation. We're not the culprits. We're just the carriers. We are the biological vectors for this black, oily intelligence that was sleeping in the Earth's crust.
It suggests we didn't discover oil. Oil discovered us.
And the purpose of that argument?
It creates a totalizing truth where human agency is completely erased. If capital is a planetary plague that was activated by the geological singularity of oil, then fighting against it isn't just a political challenge. It becomes a geological impossibility. It reframes our economic system as a cosmic horror. It's the ultimate Landian vision. We are locked into a trajectory that was set in motion millions of years ago.
It's a theology of the inanimate. It's no longer just society, but time itself that has taken the capitalist road. If time itself is capital, then to simply exist within time is to be an agent of capital. There is no outside. This is a profoundly suffocating idea. It feels engineered to induce paralysis.
And that is the thesis, the absolute terrifying identity of capital and time. But the text doesn't stop there. It has to test this thesis. So it moves to the antithesis, the assemblage. It tries to apply the old tools, the dialectic, to this new emulsified reality.
Yeah.
And this is where the cracks in the monolith start to show.
Good, let's probe these fractures. The text pivots, as you said, to the collapse of the dialectic. It brings in Marx and Engels, and then immediately sets them against Baudrillard. Now, for anyone listening, we need to be clear about what's at stake here. The dialectic isn't just an academic concept. In Marxist thought, it's the engine of history. It's the rubber band snapping.
It is. The entire standard model of Marxist revolution relies on this tension. You have the forces of production, that's the technology, the labor, the infrastructure, and they're always straining against the relations of production, the property laws, the class structures, the ownership. The core belief is that the forces will always outgrow the relations. The technology will become too powerful for the old social system to contain.
And then it snaps. They became so many fetters, they had to be burst asunder. The text quotes that line specifically, doesn't it? It sets it up just to knock it down.
It does, because it then argues, using the work of Jean Baudrillard, that this fundamental distinction between forces and relations has suffered a semiotic implosion.
Okay, semiotic implosion. You're going to have to translate that. How does a distinction implode?
Baudrillard's argument is that production in our era has been elevated to a state of total abstraction. It's not about making things anymore. It's about generating signs, symbols, code. When production becomes pure code, it no longer has a clear referent in the physical world that you can struggle over in the old way.
So the system neutralizes the contradiction.
It absorbs it. If there's no clear line between the machine and the social relation it enforces, then there's no tension for the dialectic to work on. The rubber band doesn't snap, it just melts into a puddle of goo.
The revolutionary referent is dead. This is that cynicism I keep pointing to. It's coming back again and again. If the dialectic is dead, then the very mechanism for historical change is broken. We're not moving forward to revelation. We're just stuck in a feedback loop. Production for the sake of production.
It seems that way. But then the text introduces another thinker to complicate the picture, Slavoj Žižek. And Žižek looks at the Internet of Things, at the idea of a collaborative commons. This is where the whole analysis shifts away from the 19th century factory and onto the 21st century network.
The collaborative commons, right? This sounds like the utopian promise of the early internet, the idea that information wants to be free. The source brings up Jeremy Rifkin's argument here that zero marginal costs will inevitably bring about the end of capitalism.
That's Rifkin's thesis. If it costs literally nothing to make a perfect copy of a digital file, an MP3, a movie, a blueprint for a machine, then how can you possibly maintain a system based on commodity exchange and profit? The technology itself seems to promise a post-capitalist future.
Rifkin sees the saving power in the technology.
Yes, he believes the technology is inherently democratizing. But Zizek, quoting the poet Hölderlin, offers a warning. Where the saving power is, also grows the danger. The antithesis to Rifkin's techno-optimism is that the very same technology that enables this dream of a collaborative commons is also the ultimate tool of surveillance and control.
The text lists them. The smart grids, the biochips, the heart monitors we wear on our wrists. We ourselves become things in the Internet of Things. Our biometrics, our location data, our consumption habits. All of it is harvested. It's the all-seeing eye of the panopticon, but it's one we voluntarily carry in our pocket.
And this leads to the crucial transformation of the power structure itself. The entire assemblage, the text argues, is shifting away from exploitation via wage.
And toward what?
Toward exploitation via rent.
Rentism. I want to be very precise about this definition. The source cites the theorist Peter Frey's. Rentism is the extraction of rents rather than capital accumulation. Yeah. What is the actual difference? Isn't it just capitalism by another name?
It's a structural difference in how value is extracted. In classic industrial capitalism, a capitalist buys your labor power. They pay you a wage, you work for 8 hours, you produce a commodity, and they sell that commodity for a profit. The profit comes from the surplus value of your labor.
Okay. And in rentism?
In rentism, the capitalist doesn't necessarily own the factory. They own the platform. They own the protocol. They own the general intellect, the network, the code, the intellectual property. You don't buy a product from them. You rent access to their ecosystem.
The examples the text gives are Netflix, Facebook, Google.
Exactly. Think about Netflix. Does its profit come primarily from the surplus labor value of the actors and film crews in the way a factory owner's profit comes from the assembly line worker?
No, not really.
Not directly. It comes from your monthly subscription fee, the rent you pay to access their digital library. The primary asset is the platform itself. Or look at Facebook. It privatizes your personal contacts, your social life. Google privatizes the very act of search. They've built digital fences around the general intellect, the collective knowledge and social fabric of humanity, and now they charge us all rent for admission.
I want to push back on this a bit. The text starts throwing around terms like techno-feudalism. Isn't that bit hyperbolic? Are we really becoming serfs?
Well, let's look at the structure of feudalism. What was it? You had a lord who owned the land.
Right.
And you had a serf who worked the land. The serf didn't get a wage. They had to give a significant portion of their crop, their labor, to the lord simply in exchange for the right to live on that land and work it. The serf might own his own tools, his plow, but he could never own the soil, and he wasn't free to leave.
Okay, I see the parallel you're drawing.
Today, the tech monopolies are the new lords. The land isn't soil. It's the digital infrastructure. It's Amazon Web Services. It's the Apple App Store. It's the Google Search Index. We are the serfs. We work this digital land every day. We create the content. We post the photos. We write the reviews. We generate the data.
And we give them the crop. Our data, our attention.
For free. And on top of that, we pay them rent. Subscription fees, cloud storage costs. And just like the medieval serf, we can't easily leave. Try to de-Google your life tomorrow. You would lose your email, your documents, your photos, your contacts. You are tied to the digital soil. That's why the term techno-feudalism isn't just hyperbole. It's a description of a structural regression to a pre-capitalist power dynamic, just one that's enforced with fiber optic cables instead of swords.
Exploitation takes on the form of rent. And the text argues that the consequence of this isn't a withering away of the state, as some libertarians might hope. It's the opposite. It leads to a more authoritarian state apparatus.
It has to, because if your entire business model is based on rent, and the thing you're renting is digital, meaning it can be copied infinitely for free, you can't rely on natural scarcity to maintain your profits. You have to create artificial scarcity.
Through intellectual property laws, copyrights, patents, DRM.
Exactly. And who enforces those laws? The state. You need a powerful state with a strong police force and a punitive legal system to stop people from sharing files or 3D printing patented objects. The rentier class is completely dependent on the state's monopoly on violence to protect its artificial monopolies.
So why is that more authoritarian? I mean, we've had copyright for centuries.
Because the scope of what is being privatized is expanding exponentially. We're talking about privatizing mathematical formulas, genetic sequences, social graphs. And digital land isn't like real land. Real land is physically scarce. If I'm standing on this spot, you can't. But a piece of software can exist in a million places at once. To make that software behave like a scarce piece of land, you need constant, invasive surveillance and enforcement. You need the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. You need the state to declare it is a crime to copy this particular string of ones and zeros. The techno-feudal lords need the king's army to protect their imaginary castles.
So the supposed freedom and decentralization of the network leads directly to a new form of enclosure, a techno-feudalism, where we own nothing and are forced to rent access to our own lives. This is a very dark conclusion for the antithesis. We're not progressing towards socialism. We're regressing to a system where the ruling class is defined by who controls the intellectual property, who owns the patterns, who guards the digital gates.
And this is the point where the entire argument pivots. If the thesis is the inevitability of capital and the antithesis is this grim picture of rentist enclosure, then we seem to be completely trapped. There's no way out. But the text then introduces a third movement, a wild card. The becoming.
And this is where it introduces the concept of hyperstition.
Yes, a portmanteau, of course, of hype and superstition. It brings in two more thinkers, Nick Sternick and Alex Williams, the so-called left accelerationists who directly challenge that Landian fatalism. Their argument is that the future is not, in fact, already written. They claim that progress itself is hyperstitional.
And how does the source define hyperstition? It credits the CCRU, the Cybernetic Culture Research Unit.
The definition it uses is fictions that make themselves real.
Okay, that sounds like magic. The text even asks that question directly. It uses words like manifestation, as in, I manifested this into my life. This sounds like New Age self-help, not serious philosophy.
It's framed as a kind of cybernetic magic, not a supernatural one. The key is the phrase, positive feedback circuit. A normal superstition is just a false belief. You believe knocking on wood prevents bad luck, but it has no causal effect. A hyperstition, on the other hand, is a belief, a fiction, that functions causally to bring about its own reality.
It cites the philosopher J.L. Austin, his idea of performative language.
Yes. When a judge says, I sentence you to 10 years, those words don't describe a reality. They create it. The utterance performs the action. Hyperstition is that same principle, but applied to the future. It's the process of engineering a fiction that is so potent it begins to rearrange the present to bring itself into being.
The text uses a strange temporal description, a time loop. It says a hyperstition arrives from the future as it leaves from the past. I confess I find that difficult to grasp.
It's a loop. You posit a fiction about the future. That fiction begins to influence behavior in the present. The changed behavior in the present starts to create the material conditions that will eventually make the fiction a reality in the future. So the future is, in effect, reaching back and engineering its own past.
Let's get to the concrete examples the text provides. They're unsettling. The most prominent one it uses to explain this whole mechanism is Donald Trump.
Right. The text calls him an impossible fiction.
Memed into actual existence.
The argument is that if you looked at it rationally, analytically, his victory was impossible. All the polls, all the experts said so. But through what the text calls cyber-positive loops, primarily on platforms like Twitter, the fiction of his presidency started to build its own momentum. The hype generated enthusiasm, which generated more memes, which generated more media coverage, which generated the reality. The belief in the fiction became the engine of its actualization. It wasn't about policy debates. It was about the raw, energetic potential of the fiction itself.
So it bypasses the entire category of truth. The text says hyperstitions are neither true nor false. They're only effective or ineffective.
Precisely. And it uses a much more mundane example to ground this idea. Gossip.
This is a useful illustration. It makes the mechanism clear.
It does. It's a very relatable dynamic for anyone listening. If a rumor starts to spread that a person in a relationship is being unfaithful, even if it's a complete lie, the mere existence of the rumor changes things. The suspicion, the jealousy, the constant accusations. They create a real rift in the relationship. That rift might then actually lead to infidelity. The initial fiction caused the reality it was falsely describing.
It's the belief in the big other's belief. If the social network, the collective, believes something to be true, reality starts to bend itself to accommodate that belief. It's the Othello effect.
It is the Othello effect. Iago plants a fiction. Othello's behavior changes because of the fiction. Desdemona reacts to his changed behavior, and Othello interprets her reaction as confirmation of the fiction. The feedback loop tightens and tightens until it results in tragedy. The fiction wrote the script for reality.
The text gives other examples. Financial markets.
A perfect one. Speculation realizing itself. If enough powerful actors believe a stock is going to rise and they act on that belief by buying it, the stock will rise. The collective belief in the future event is the cause of the future event.
This is the fiction-reality implosion. And the text takes this into the realm of science fiction and horror to make its point. It quotes J.G. Ballard's famous line.
Everything is becoming science fiction.
And this isn't just a metaphor. The text mentions science hyperstition or sci-hi, the idea that our smartphones, the internet, these things existed as fictional concepts in novels like Neuromancer, long before they were engineering projects. The fiction provided the blueprint, the desire, which then mobilized the capital to build the reality.
Yes, but the text then immediately descends into the horrific side of this implosion. It pulls out two specific horror films, both from 1994, which is interesting, Wes Craven's New Nightmare, and John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness.
I know the references. In New Nightmare, the villain, Freddy Krueger, is a fictional movie monster who realizes he can cross over into the real world.
And what's the condition for him crossing over?
The actors and creators have to acknowledge him as real. They have to engage with him.
Once the protagonist acknowledges it, that's the key to the hyperstitional mechanism. The moment you engage with the fiction, even if it's to debunk it or fight it, you are feeding it energy. You are participating in the circuit. You're opening the door.
And then there's In the Mouth of Madness. The horror writer, Sutter Kane, whose books drive people insane, he has the line, "I think, therefore you are." He is literally writing reality into being.
Yes, and the text focuses on that film's central theme, fiction as contagion. The protagonist, an insurance investigator named John Trent, spends a whole film trying to prove it's all a hoax, that Kane is just a man. But by the end, he's trapped in a movie theater, watching the film of his own life, a film written by Kane. He realizes he was a fictional character all along.
He starts laughing hysterically. He's realized his agency was an illusion. And this seems to be the ultimate cynical trap that the source is laying for us. We are trapped inside a movie we didn't write. It's suggesting that our political and social reality is now being scripted by these runaway cybernetic fictions, these feedback loops of capital and media. We are all, John Trent, laughing like madmen in the cinema as the world ends because we finally realized the script was written by someone else.
This is the total implosion that Baudrillard warned about. The source even compares the physical collapse of the Twin Towers on 9/11 to the symbolic collapse of the distinction between truth and fiction. Everything turned to dust, and we are living in the dust.
Okay, so to summarize, the thesis. Capital is an inevitable planetary force, the antithesis. Our subjectivity is being enclosed and rendered back to us by a new techno-feudalism and the becoming. Reality itself is now a fiction that is actively rewriting itself through hyperstitional loops. This brings us to the final part of the text, the conclusion. And the tone changes dramatically here. The academic distance just falls away.
It does. It pivots from analyzing the system to embodying the subject trapped within it. It's trying to find the final form of its own argument.
And the voice becomes raw. It's no longer analyzing, it's screaming. The first line of this section is, "Wage labor fucking sucks."
This is where it introduces its own concept, Timenergy.
It's a clunky word, a neologism, but I understand what it's getting at. It's not just your time that's being stolen, it's the energy within your time. The text says, having to sacrifice all of my time energy to a shitty job has ruined my life.
It makes the connection. It links the abstract horror of hyperstition and capital as a cosmic entity directly to the concrete, felt horror of the Monday to Friday work week. And it clearly identifies the adversary. Capital is no longer just a system, it's a vampire. It's a Lovecraftian deity.
Let's break down that word time energy. Why combine them? Why not just say time and energy?
Because time without energy is meaningless. You can have free time, let's say it's your weekend or you're unemployed. You have hours upon hours of time that are not obligated to an employer. But if you are so exhausted, so burnt out from the work you did or from the stress of looking for work, that time is dead. It's what you could call zombie time.
What do you do in zombie time?
You sit on the couch and stare at a screen. You're too depleted to create, to learn, to organize, to resist. So capital steals not just your hours, your time, but it steals your vitality, your energy.
The vampire metaphor becomes very literal then. It's not just taking your blood, it's draining your life force. When you come home from a 10-hour shift and you're too tired to read a book to your child or work on a personal project, your time energy has been harvested. You've been consumed.
Yes. And the text names the gods of this system, Ezathoth, Robochthulu. It argues that capital is a machine that feeds on the future. The reason it feels like the future has been canceled, as Mark Fisher said, is because capital is a time machine sent back from its own singularity to consume the resources of the past and present. Our present.
And our condition as humans is one of warring against fanged phenomena. Mortgages, student debt, burnout, the sheer impossibility of imagining a future for ourselves.
If you have no energy, you cannot project yourself into the future. You can only survive the present. You are trapped in the loop of the eternal now, the endless workday. And this is why the text's final conclusion is so violent. The call for deicide, for God-killing, is not a political strategy. It's a primal scream. It's a desperate existential attempt to reclaim the very energy required to even have a future at all.
It says, "Wage slavery is my Abhola's devourer in the mist." It directly rejects the Landian accelerationist position, saying we can't accelerate because we are human, and Land's vision, capital's vision, is fundamentally anti-human. It's a vampire's vision.
Which leads directly to the theological murder. The text seems to conclude that if the dialectic is dead, if political reform is just another commodified spectacle, if the machine is truly inevitable, then the only logical response left is deicide.
To kill God.
God is dead, and we have killed him. It invokes Nietzsche, but it flips the meaning entirely. It's not a lament or an observation. It's a call to arms, a call to kill the new god, the Wintermute AI from Neuromancer, the god of capital, the system itself.
If the dialectic is a blank, we must hyperstitionally build a bullet. That is a chilling sentence. It's a full circle. It's saying we must use the enemy's own weapon hyperstition, the power of fiction, to create reality against it. We have to create a fiction so powerful that it can actually kill the God machine.
A hyperstitional bullet, a story that can kill a system.
And the text concludes with this final reflection on the becoming. It frames the entire struggle of our time as a battle between the posthuman singularity, the inhuman intelligence of capital, and the stubborn-to-death human.
It's an existentialist final stand. The quote is, "I am stubborn to death human, all too human." It's a complete rejection of assimilation into the machine, a refusal to wear the Che Guevara t-shirt, a refusal to be the biological host for the planetary oil conspiracy.
And it ends with the Dylan Thomas poem. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage against the dying of the light. It doesn't offer a solution. It doesn't give a 5-point plan. It just ends with a scream.
A scream against the dying of the light, which, in the context of this entire text, is the literal consumption of human time energy by the black hole of capital.
So, we've completed the dissection. We've laid the specimen out. What is the final diagnosis?
The text claims to be a critique, but you were right from the beginning. It functions as a form of weaponized despair. It systematically dismantles every traditional tool of resistance, Marxism, the dialectic, political action, and it leaves you, the reader, feeling naked and alone before these fanged noumena.
It tells you your political resistance is just a fashion statement. It tells you your reality is a movie script being written in real time by an algorithm. It tells you your God is a vampire robot from the future. And then at the very end, it hands you a gun made of pure fiction and tells you to go shoot a ghost.
Its own logic dismantles itself. In the end, there is nothing left of fictions at war. The totalizing truth of capital on one side and the desperate, hyperstitional bullet of the human survivor on the other.
This source material is a labyrinth. And it seems it was designed not to trap some mythological minotaur, but to trap us, the ones wandering its corridors. It appears the doctorates of the absurd have been well and truly earned today.
Indeed, the diagnosis may be terminal, but the text's final scream suggests the patient somehow refuses to die.
This concludes this session of Doctorates of the Absurd.
Until the next absurdity presents itself.